That's why you couldn't find the mouse wheel. It went over to the. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if anything happens, they'll have IT kind of help.
All right. Well, give me a second, guys, so I can load up. Oh, wait. Is it the keyboard? Yeah. Okay. No, that's the keyboard, right? Yeah, that's the keyboard. I disconnected the keyboard. Because you only have one USB on the. All right. I got it. Yeah. Yeah, the keyboard was connected.
Well, we need to keep the keyboard connected because that has your clicker. But we can connect here.
Oh, okay.
Because it's got a bus.
Okay, hold on. Let me. I didn't know.
You can, yeah, there you go. You got it.
Sorry.
All right. Well, okay. So great. I love that it's just us. It's kind of intimate today. It's just the three of us here today. So like Jason said, my name is Leticia Santos. I work out of the Oklahoma City Training Center for FEMSA. We train all the inspectors, the people that come and check out your systems, the state inspector and the federal inspectors out of Oklahoma. I've been there, with FEMSA for about 9 years now. I am actually originally from Puerto Rico. That's where I started as an inspector myself back in the 90s. And ended up moving to Florida, working with an operator, and then somehow got convinced to move to Oklahoma. But it's great living in Oklahoma. It is great living there. So before we jump into the presentation, I want to talk to you about a couple of things that you have with you. First, this little document here. In the presentation, you'll see Jason's going to upload the presentations to the CPUC website later on. I guess he said he's going to email everybody, let them know when everything's posted.
Yeah.
So in the presentation, you have the same information. I just thought that in the meantime, this comes in handy, something easy to have. It has all the websites where you can find information. Yeah. All the websites where you can find information. So you have the very first link on the first page. It is a link to a report that DOT publishes every month on any significant rulemaking that is coming out. All right. And then the next two links below that are to the Office of Management and Budget. From the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, you have a DOT rule list, right? When you click on that link or you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a website that has every rule that the Department of Transportation is working on. So you can either type on the search FEMSA, or you can scroll down to where you start seeing the FEMSA links, and it will give you all the rules that are in the process in whatever stage they are. And you also have the last link on that first page to link to Part 106 of Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Part 106, if you're interested in knowing how all these regulations, the process to create a regulation, that is the section of the code that tells you how it works all the way from proposing a rule for an ID coming out all the way to the final rule. In the back, you have 3 links at the top. These 3 links are related to the new, not new, but to Section 114 of the Pipes Act that talks about detection and repair of leaks, which is something that it's already in process, and we're going to talk about it. So the very first link is the docket page where you will find, because this has not been put into regulation by PHMSA yet. It's only still in the mandate of the Pipes Act, right? But PHMSA is in the process of creating regulation. So there is a docket page. And this, every time, if you go to this docket page, you're going to start seeing the information come in there when there are meetings, when any document or comment are published is going to be in that page. Okay, so all the information about that. And then the other 2 on the side are links to the U.S. Code, Section 60102 and Section 60108. These are the 2 U.S. Code parts that are addressing right now the requirements that are put forth by Section 114, right? So this is the closest that you have to regulations right now. So reading the information in Section 114 and going to Section 60102 and 60108 will give you more specific information on what you're required to do. Then you have, after that, a link to the PHMSA technical resources, and also at the end there is a link to the TPAC meeting site. There's a lot of information, a lot of places. Sometimes trying to find this information from the PHMSA website can be a little cumbersome. So that's why I like to provide you the links. When you get the copy of the presentation, every link that you're going to see in there, everything that's underlined, it's a workable link, so you should be able to click on it. It will take you to the information. So in the book, the regulations book that you have with you, in this book you have Part 191 and Part 192, okay? So, and this is up to the most updated version of the code. So in the first, if you open the front matter, okay, back here you have a table. That table has all the contact information from the technical staff at the Training and Qualification Center. Okay, that's me and all of my coworkers, including Stephen back there. So you can give us a call anytime you have a question, and we're happy to answer your calls and guide you through stuff. We'll be with you on the phone all day long. We just won't put it in writing. Okay? And then if you go to the back matter or the back cover and you open, I think this is a cool little tool that you have back here, because back there you have a list of all the current pipeline safety regulations that apply. And then under that, you have all the pipeline safety related parts of CFR 49. So anything that applies to pipeline, all the way from Part 190 to Part 199 and Part 40, which is drug and alcohol. And then under that, you have the latest amendment to each one of these parts of CFR 49. And then the last thing that you have there, so you see under Part 192, the last amendment was Amendment 131. That's the latest amendment. And under that, you have a breakdown of the subparts of Part 192. And the reason you have that breakdown there is to help you understand which sections of the code or what subparts of the code are retroactive and which ones are not. And when I say retroactive, it means if it's under the retroactive column, it means that it will apply to the system regardless of the date of installation. Okay? So that gives you a little bit of a guide, answering, do I have to comply with code? I'm installing, making a new installation, what applies, right? As far as installation date is concerned. So that's that. Any questions on that, guys? Okay, so let's talk about what has been the latest updates that will affect some of you. And we're going to talk about amendments to Part 191, what happened in the last couple of years in Part 192, the Pipes Act in Section 114 that I just mentioned, and the information part, which is basically the same information that you have in that links document that we provided you. All right, so one of the changes in Part 191 is an update to the definition of an incident. Previously, an incident, the damage, estimated property damage was up to $50,000, right? Or $50,000 or more. Now that has been increased to $129,300 or more, including the loss of operator and others. So that what that means is that incident becomes reportable if it has at least $129,300 of property damage. Okay. Before you had to report, it was a reportable incident. It was if it was $50,000. So that was put in place like 3 decades ago, the $50,000. So with the change in times, $50,000 happened with a blink of an eye, right? So a lot of things became reportable. So that now has increased to go, you start at $129,300. At that point, it becomes reportable if there's that much in loss, property loss. And that includes loss to you as an operator and loss to others, or both, but it doesn't include the cost of gas. And because it was not done this way before, from now on, it's going to be getting adjusted for inflation from 2021 on. And as these changes happen, then it will be posted on the PHMSA website. There is a formula in there that they created for making this determination and calculating the cost of living and all this stuff to make the adjustments. It's in Part 191. Another thing that's going, I don't know what the projector looks a little off. Another thing that has changed in Part 191 was that the number of the mechanical fittings failure report. There used to be you had the options, right, of submitting a dedicated report and just things failed. You could report it to every month, or make a report, a dedicated report with your annual report in March, right? So now the dedicated report has been eliminated. It's no longer required, but you're still going to have to report it under the annual report. It's under Part C of your annual report. You'll report the number of hazardous leaks that involve mechanical joints. One more thing is under safety-related conditions, and this is about reporting exceeding always been in the code that you have to recognize, you have to sign the system so they don't exceed MAOP plus a buildup that's allowed over that, right? Over that MAOP. Now, this situation, it's always been on the code, but it was never um, recognized as a safety-related condition. It had never been required to be reported. So now it has to be reported. Every time there's an exceedance, and there are specifics under 19123 AC, A6, it will tell you exactly in which, under which conditions those exceedances need to be reported. If your system exceeds MAOP plus buildup, then it has to be reported as a safety-related condition. So that means it has to be reported in writing, in a letter that it's titled safety-related condition, and under 19123 it tells you exactly how you have to report it. Okay. Okay, so that's it for Part 191. For Part 192, there's 3 documents that have been incorporated by reference, 3 new documents. 1104, API 1104, it's been in a document incorporated by reference. It's just been updated to the 20th edition. ASTM D2513, 18A. Also, it's an updated edition of ASTM D2513. And then ASTM F2620, 19 is a new document incorporated by reference for plastic fusion, and we're going to see where that one applies. That's one of the very important things of the code when you're looking at the incorporated documents that are incorporated by reference. Those are in 192.7. One of the particular things about those documents is that it's a very specific version, that it's the one that is accepted by PHMSA. So if for whatever reason you needed to implement anything that required any of those documents, you need to make sure that you or your contractor are following the correct version that it's in the code, right? It's not always going to be the latest, greatest. It's not always going to be the latest version. Sometimes we have a 2004 document incorporated by reference in the code. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then in section on the limitations for welding and welding operators, it was amended to include that welders can actually weld on a procedure that they have done in the previous 7.5 months, right? Before, it used to be if they have not done this in 6 months, they cannot weld to this procedure. Now that time frame has been extended to 7.5 months, but they have to demonstrate that the last time they did it, 7.5 months prior to the current date, they did it and it was acceptable under 1124, API 1124. For plastic pipe, the qualifying joining procedures under 283 was amended to eliminate requiring ASTM D638, right? Right now, it doesn't require that the test is done to that specific standard. It just requires that it's done to a listed specification, meaning any specification that meets that. And then under 192.285, for qualifying persons to make joints, it was amended to include that the heat fusions, except for electrofusions, will be visually inspected in accordance to the new incorporated by reference document, ASTM F2620. So any heat fusions, plastic joints, other than electrofusion joints, will be inspected, visually inspected, following the procedures that are in the standard. Okay. Or it gives also the provision to do it to another procedure that can provide the same or better level of safety than that standard. So it's not locked into that one standard.
Every joint has.
Yes. Every joint has to be visually inspected.
By someone other than the person welding the joint.
That is a debate on whether that is, but a lot of times, most of the times, when a person gets qualified for joining, they also get qualified for inspecting in the same qualification. So it can be done by the same person. Yes, it has to be a part of the qualification. All right, so when it comes to corrosion control, under 465, now if you had a rectifier, it had to be inspected every 2.5 months, right? Go there, inspect it every 2.5 months. Now it allows those rectifiers to be inspected remotely, but at least once a year, it has to be done on site. So the 2.5 month interval can be met by doing a remote inspection, but at least once a year, you have to go to the rectifier and look at it, lay eyes on it. For monitoring under 481, there used to be just 2 items on this, right? Two evaluation periods. It was 1 evaluation period for onshore, 1 for offshore. Now, the onshore evaluation was divided into segments, and if it's onshore and it's not a service line, the pipeline has to be evaluated every 3 years, not exceeding 39 months for corrosion, right? Every 3 years, if it's not a service line and it's onshore. If it's onshore and is a service line, then that can be done every 5 years, unless you find corrosion on it. If you find corrosion on it, then that interval will drop back to 3 years. Has to be done every 3 years. Okay?
The inspection process.
No, not necessarily. This is probably pipe to soil potential readings, yeah. Oh, actually, this is atmospheric corrosion. Sorry.
It's all above ground.
So this is all above ground pipe. So above ground pipe, okay? Now, this section on the records changed a little bit because of that new, the way those intervals were split up. So under the corrosion control record keeping, it was amended to keep the two most recent records for inspections of atmospheric corrosions for those pipelines that you're inspecting every 5 years, which would be the service lines, right? If it's a service line that has no corrosion and it's above ground, right? We're looking for atmospheric corrosion, and you're inspecting it every 5 years, then you need to keep the 2 most recent inspections for those type of lines in your system. Okay, these are the records that the inspectors are going to come and look. So basically, your last 10 years of inspections, because if you're doing it every 5 years, you 2. And then for MAOP, and I think none of you operate here a pipeline that operates 100%, 100 pounds or more, but there is a one addition when it comes to the factors for the test pressure for establishing MAOP. Any pipeline that is installed after July 1st, 2020 operates above at 100 PSID or more. This will be the new factors for those pipelines. That's basically for pipelines in Class 1 locations, okay, installed after July 2020. DIP requirements. These are 3 exemptions now for DIP. that happened, under, 1003, and it's excluding master meter systems, completely excluded from the requirements, and it's excluding, farm taps, basically, right? An individual service line that is directly connected to a production line or gathering line is a farm tap. So they are being excluded from, the requirements of, DIM, but other maintenance requirements have been included under 192.740 to make up for eliminating the DIM requirements. And then individual service lines that are directly connected to either a transmission or regulated gathering pipeline. And under the requirements of DIM, identifying threats, now atmospheric corrosion has to be included as a threat. Okay. The section 1009 was removed, which was basically what we talked about already regarding 191, the mechanical and fitting failures. What does an operator have to do if a mechanical fitting failed? When you read that section, it basically directed you to reporting it. Since there's no direct or dedicated report requirement now, that section was taken out of DIM. Then emergency plans. I think this is where we have the most changes and inclusions, just stuff that has been added under emergency plans. So, and it's not really a lot. I mean, not a lot, not big changes, just a lot of little changes. So one of the things that has been added, and it's been throughout, you're going to see the common theme throughout I'm going to be talking about it. Establishing and maintaining communication with a public safety answering point. So I'm going to call that 911 from this point forward. So before, right, under emergency plans, the requirement is you have to have procedures for establishing and maintaining communication with public officials, and usually that meant the fire department, the police, the local fire department, EMS. Now, usually 911 was excluded, right? And a lot of these calls, because it was not explicitly included in the code, a lot of these calls that came, about somebody calling about a leak, go through the 911 system. They call 911, don't call a gas company, right? They usually call 911, I smell gas. So to help with that, because as an operator, you're required to have trained personnel on receiving these calls and giving direction to the people that call. And 911 personnel was not being trained on how to receive a call from a gas leak and what to tell people. So now it is required that as part of your emergency plan, you include the 911 centers so they are knowledgeable about your system, how you're going to need them, what are your capabilities. And this has to be a 911 center or public safety answering center that is within the reach of the incident site or within the reach of the operator's facility, right? Or wherever the public officials are at. That also includes creating liaison, right? That also extends when you creating liaison efforts. So that means that when you start making these meetings or sending out information about your system to the public officials, so you can create a one-on-one relationship with them so they understand what your system is and how can they help you in the moment of an emergency. We include not only the fire, police, EMS, but also 911 centers, right? So they are all informed and know how can they be of help. And in that process, when you're creating liaison efforts, you are responsible as the operator to establish what the responsibilities in a case of an emergency in your system are going to be, okay? Under A6, the procedure has to include actions to minimize hazards to life, property, or the environment by the release of gas. Okay? If the release of gas is going to be hazardous to the environment, life, or property, there has to be procedures in your plan to reduce or minimize or mitigate. Not mitigate, right? Because mitigate is after the fact, but to minimize the impact. So things such as emergency shutdowns, valve shutdowns, or pressure reduction have to be part of the plan. And again, under this section as well, is also expanded to include 911 centers. And like I mentioned before, it has to be 911 centers that are local, right? Within the community and jurisdiction of where your pipeline is located. Right? The 911 center that would cover that area. So those are the 911 centers. 911 centers are regional, right? And local. So you got to figure out which 911 center is the one that covers, because when you're creating liaison, when a call comes into 911, right? You don't know where that call is going. We don't know where that call is going. Somebody's answering the phone, right? But when you're creating the liaison effort and you want to send communications, you need to know to which 911 center you're sending that information, right? So that's why it says it has to be the 911 center that covers the area of your pipeline's jurisdiction, right? The people that are going to respond and dispatch personnel to an emergency in your system. There is a new section added, 812, where you have to have a procedure to determine if a notification of a potential rupture is actually a rupture event. Okay? So basically, you need to have a procedure in an emergency plan. There's a new section and a new definition in the code. Notification of pipeline rupture. That's a new definition. And what that means, it is referring to the notification of or observation by either an operator, any personnel or control person, field personnel, a nearby pipeline utility, a nearby pipeline or utility personnel, anyone in the public, local responders, or any public authority. So basically anybody that observes, right? And this person notifies of a indication that there is a potential unintentional or uncontrolled release of a large volume of gas. You have to say something, Jason? Uh-huh. Yes. So, so following that definition, right, you need to include a procedure in your plan, in your emergency plan, that allows you to identify, if I get somebody calling me, telling me there is a bunch of gas coming out of this, blowing out of this system, right? I need to be able to determine if that information actually means a rupture event, right? As is defined, when you look at the definition under Part 192.3, it gives you exactly what are those instances. What does it look like? What is considered a rupture event, right? So you will have a procedure in your plan that will help you determine is this actually a rupture event. So your procedure has to include the source of the information, right? Which sources of information are we going to consider? What are the operational factors that might lead to a rupture? and anything else that you can use to determine if an actual rupture has occurred. A rupture, basically, we're talking about not just a leak hole, but a big amount of gas blowing out of your system. Okay? And then under 615C was amended again to require maintaining liaison with public and safety officials, and including 911 centers, to learn and establish responsibilities in a gas pipeline emergency, familiarize them with your capabilities as an operator, and identify the type of emergencies that will be communicated through them, right? And you're gonna need to explain in your procedures or in the information that you provide them, you know, you might get this type of call. It might be somebody from the public calling in for a gas leak, or it might be somebody calling in for a rupture, right? So those are the kind of emergencies that they might get calls for, and how they are going to communicate that information to you. And also to plan for mutual assistance to minimize hazards, right? So you plan for mutual assistance with fire, police, emergency responders, and now also 911 centers. Now, because all of these changes under 615, it kind of trickles down to investigation of failures. So investigation of failures, basically, it's always told you that you have to have a procedure to investigate the failures. And it doesn't mean necessarily an incident, but every failure in your system needs to be investigated to the level that it requires, right? Not everything is going to be a full-blown investigation. Sometimes you just record, you know, a regulator failed, and you just know what were the circumstances, and that's your investigation. Boom, you're there, right? So, but it's asking you to be a little bit more specific with your investigation procedures, and including information for investigating and analyzing failures and incidents, and including sending the failed pipe or equipment or component to a lab if necessary for examination, right? And also, beyond that, this is the kicker on this, is that now you have to have procedures for using the lessons learned from that investigation to implement or make changes in your system. And you have to document that, how you're going to implement the lessons learned in either improving your system, creating new training or providing new training or retraining employees, reviewing your plans if necessary to avoid, right? It's all to avoid the same situation to happen again. No, you don't have to. But if you were to have a big incident, probably something that caused a major, yeah. If you cannot determine by yourself what happened to that piece of equipment, it might be need to be sent to a lab. But usually that will happen under circumstances where you have incidents that are, it's a reportable incident, or, you know, maybe you have loss of life. Yeah. So that's, those kind of situations are going to grant that, right? So it might not be something that you see happening, right? But it's something that you have to have a procedure for if the situation were to happen. Jason.
What the actual cost from a small operator, a little large operator. It could be that what the cost was. But never seen it once.
Yeah, it's not something, but it's something that applies. It's a general change into the requirement, so it's something that you have to have procedure for, and how you would handle that. Now, this is a new section, right? This is, remember we talked about the potential rupture? So this is where the new section, 192.635, where the potential rupture comes into play. So in your procedures manual, you need to have a section for potential ruptures that will include that an unplanned pressure loss that is greater than 10% within 50 minutes. It's outside of normal operating it's outside of normal operating pressures. Okay, so you can see what's happening there, right? You're having 10% of gas loss within 50 minutes. That's a lot of gas loss. Okay, so you need to establish in your procedure that this is a rupture event and that this is outside your operating pressures, right? Because you're going to have a major pressure loss in your system if something like this happens. Then an unexpected change in pressure, flow rate, or equipment function downstream or upstream, right? If you have a sudden loss of pressure or sudden increase in pressure and you start popping valves, right? And you see valves start popping up everywhere in the system, you have an increase in pressure, that's an abnormal event or a potential rupture. And an unexplained rapid release of a large volume of gas, a fire, an explosion in the immediate vicinity of the pipeline, which is also another indication of a rupture, potential rupture. Okay? So procedure in your plan that talks about it addresses these situations and what's going to be done in these situations. And that's it for 192 and 191. The following section, the Pipes Act of 2020, it's basically the law that requires the Secretary of the Department of Transportation to create regulations for pipeline, right? And that's where PHMSA comes into play, and we create regulation. So there is a section under this Pipes Act, Section 114, which works. We're only talking about Section 114, but Section 114 and Section 113 of the Pipes Act work together to kind of establish the requirements of what we're going to talk about. So, like I've explained in previous days, the Pipes Act is a really hard to find document. Okay? Try to Google it. It took me a couple of days to find it. So, I saved you the trouble of having to look for it. So when you get this presentation, you're going to get this link right here. The Pipes Act is actually a portion of one of the many, many acts that were published under Public Law 116-260. Okay, so there were many acts. So this is a 2,000-something, like 2,600 page document, a large document. So within that 2,000 page document, there's a lot of acts that were enacted for other agencies. And we made Section R. So we are in the Pipes Act is Division R. So when you click on this, it's going to take you to the document directly. You're going to open this document. It's going to take a little bit to load on your computer. So when you open it, just word search Division R, and it's going to take you exactly to the text of the Pipes Act of 2020. Okay, you have the whole Pipes Act in that document. So in Section 114, there's self-implementing requirements that you have to meet, right? It's not, they're self-implementing, which means that there's no need for PHMSA, for the requirements to be codified under PHMSA for you to start meeting the requirements. So Section 114 and 113 contain the broad language of what are going to be the requirements for the regulations itself. And then you will find additional information or a little bit more detailed information under the U.S. Code 60102 and 60108 that I gave you the links for as well. From the top of the second page of your document. And basically, this applies to every operator of a gas pipeline or a liquid pipeline. Okay? So by December 27, 2021, which is 1 year after the act was enacted, the operators have to have or update your O&M plans to address eliminating hazardous leaks of natural gas, minimizing releases of natural gas, and replacing or remediating areas in your system that you know leak. I'm sorry? Yes. So who has to update their plans? Each person owning and operating a gas pipeline facility or hazardous liquid pipelines. It also may apply to facilities that, liquid facilities that use natural gas in the pipeline facility or other regions of operation. And the replacement and remediation is not limited to just gas pipeline operators. What does it look like? Well, this is it. If you look for, you can Google this advisory bulletin. You can look, this is the advisory bulletin number, was published in 2021. And basically, you need to have procedures, update your procedures to address what you're going to do to minimize unintentional leaks. That could be from equipment, from pipeline flanges, valves, right? Things that start leaking for no reason and it was unintended. But also planned emissions. When you have planned emissions, like when a relief valve works, that's a planned emission because it's doing the job, right? It's relieving the extra pressure in the system. So that also has to be addressed. What are you going to do in your system to minimize that from happening? Also, vented or planned emissions happen in pneumatic device bleeds, blowdowns, incomplete combustion, and other pressure protection and venting. And then the other part of this, besides minimizing those releases to the atmosphere, is what you're going to do about those areas in your system that are known to leak. You know, you have areas that you have a lot of these little grade 3 leaks, you know, small leaks. You need to remediate that. Either fix it or replace it. And your procedure has to address what are you going to do when you find these areas in your system, how long it's going to take you, what are the possible steps, how you're going to first remediate maybe, and then, you know, if it meets these conditions that we're going to replace, so that kind of language should be in your plan. Ultimately, it is all addressed for PHMSA to see when the inspectors come and see your plan, your O&M plan. How is your plan helping minimize releases of gas that could be hazardous to people or the environment, right? And again, this was yesterday. We are a little behind. Okay? I know that probably you have some of these stuff. When you look at your plans, you do have, because we do have requirements for leak survey, and we do have requirements for repairs in the code already. So sometimes to a certain point, you're meeting some of these requirements already. So I think, Jason, they created a guidance document to help you implement the requirements. Mhm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this is basically the same information that I already gave you. You have the links over here too. So when you get the presentation, you'll be able to click on all these links. They're workable links, and it will take you right into the information. Do you have any other questions?
How does PIMSA work with coordination? We get inspected by the CPUC.
Mm-hmm.
Is that's who enforcement of PIMSA?
Yeah. CPUC is the agency with the authority to enforce pipeline regulations in the state of California. And obviously, they also have their own regulations that kind of supersede the Part 192 requirements. So they might be a little bit more stringent or have additional requirements in certain parts.
This is a federal cost.
Yes. And FEMSA, this book that you have in front of you, this regulation, these are the minimum federal requirements. So I mean, this is the bare minimum that you have to be doing with your system. And then the states come in, and if they consider certain areas where they can make improvements, or they might be a little bit more stringent or have different intervals requirements, nothing that they implement can be less stringent than that, because that is the bare minimum that has to be done. Yeah.
There's the update. They have to verify that their standards are.
Yes. Yeah. The enforcement is on FEMSA. But you have Gordon and Jason and Matt, if you guys have questions, or you have all of our contact information. I mean, these guys are doing everything possible to help you navigate all of this. And we'd be more than happy to take your calls and answer your questions, to help you get there. All right, there's one more thing that in the book. Here, you please would take a minute, scan that code with your phone. It will take you to a survey. Stephen is going to be here in a little bit and talk to you about OQ, which is, I know it's a topic of interest always. So if you let us know how we did, what other things that you would like, if you give us feedback other than just filling out the survey and things that you'd be interested in knowing about, that we can bring the next time that we come back, right? Things, topics that you want to hear about, that'd be great. Okay? So if you don't have any other questions for me, That's all I have for you today, and I have to leave you because I have a flight to catch.
Before we start up our next presentation, 5 minutes late, get that stretch, use the restroom if you need to. That red cooler, like I said, has water in it if you need that as well.